In this comprehensive review of the current state of the town, we offer, before the election and before the ability of the public is taken away to change their future for another 2 years, a clear and accurate understanding of the nature of their town boards and their Republican Party representatives based on years of review. We intend over the next 2 to 3 years, if necessary, to slowly and clearly expose the dysfunctional underbelly of the corrupt town of Western, its boards and its committees, along with the observance of its GOP, in acts of applying secrecy and restrictive participation in that committee as well. All the boards, deceiving many of the members of the public and/or members of the Republican Party as well, and limiting their involvement in information for purpose. The data contained in this synopsis is from well over 27 months already of detailed analysis of this town. Every town board meeting, budget, or special meeting has been watched and noted many times. Every planning board, zoning board, and special meeting, all recorded and documented. Hundreds of hours of investigation, of detailed notes and videos, emails, communication with the Committee on Open Government, FOIL, attorney feedback, and other training and research processes. The use of multiple public and private agencies have been documented and/or will be documented in this process, and used to compile this and future information on the town of Western. The content will be touted by those of either the Rhino Republican Committee here or the town's boards as rubbish, trash, stories, and their favorite misinformation. But the one thing none of those in either the staunch Rhino Republican Committee nor any of the town boards have to support them is anything on audio, video, email, or FOIL. When the town spouts misinformation, they have nothing to back it up. When the public spouts errors, omissions, removal of rights, and faux process or actions that do not support the public the boards serve, we are covered with ample supporting documentation. If the town has no other way out, they simply create policy to change the law, or policy to reflect their arbitrary desires into law, and that is a travesty of injustice to the public they should be serving. There is no other town in New York State that has had the direct 365 24/7 attention to bring these kinds of resources to bear on the process or not of exposing a local government's arbitrary actions, as the town of Western has. This data has or will have caused or created change metrics that have turned over 3 councilpersons, a town supervisor, a highway superintendent, 6 or more planning or zoning board members, created discussion on positional ethics considerations, created an ethics board, created formal FOIL policies, created change in maintenance, highway, and meetings consistency, and has or will continue to move this town into transparency as time moves on. The town board has reacted by shutting down the town hall, allowing no more open hours for public access, holding meetings in secret, creating faux laws and policies that the boards can't or won't enforce. They have consistently been recorded alienating, criticizing, harassing, menacing, assaulting, discriminating, withholding constitutional rights from, withholding FOIL and open meeting law rights from, withholding budget and accounting records from, and attempting to set up the public in meeting after meeting, all in order to have the police called on them, while none of those calls to the police by the town on the public have resulted in anything other than the arrest of their own town court clerk. The town board has been plagued by a reckless passion for retaliation and retribution due to the public's exposure of their actions or errors. The resultant mix of retaliation and retribution toward the taxpayers that this town board should have been serving over the past nearly 3 years is sickening and disgraceful. All of this relatively recent, and only 2.5 years since the beginning of the town's scrutiny under cameras, was brought on by the town's hasty and unsupportive re-evaluation in the early spring of 2023. Initially not knowing how to handle it, the town opted to manage it away, rather than to work with the public it serves. The town took the low road and began its slow march of enforcement, the very enforcement that would lead to their attempts to cover up the very acts that have been, and will continue to be overexposed here in the town of Western for years to come. And all of that attached by name and by video, regardless as to whether those on these boards that play with the people in the town of Western as a kid plays with a Tonka truck, stays in office or not. By bringing this transparent light into the corners and dark places where these town boards hide away, we will expose the creation of policies and laws to exact vengeance, on camera, toward the very public they serve. It is unsurprising that those not seeking re-election, Len Charney and Larry Myrick, are not extending what we consider their reign of terror beyond December 31, 2025. Those actions with respect to their removal of the public's freedoms and/or rights under New York state policy or under the Constitution. The arbitrary measures they, and their derivative boards in Western, have taken in the past 3 years along with those they will take before December 31, 2025, may severely restrict this town and its taxpayers into the near future. This situation is comparable to those prisoners at Mid-State and Marcy, where the CO beat-up squads in central New York prisons shackle their hostages, while exaggerating their power of life and death over them, all under the guise of New York state law. The state is implementing changes, and throughout 2025 and beyond, the consequences of those misguided policies and procedures will be borne by the taxpayers via lawsuits and payouts in the millions or more. Why borne by the taxpayers? Because elected officials are rarely held accountable. Consider Pete Donahue Jr., chairman of the Planning Board, who in 2023 publicly declared his full accountability. While he claims the taxpayers in Western, the public he serves, remain totally unaccountable. They have no accountability, he states, of the public, calling the public children and unaccountable, and yet every year the town cashes checks written to the town for property taxes those unaccountable folks are accountable for. A steady stream of full accountability dollars from the public that all the boards here serve. If Pete Donahue Jr.'s statements as noted were falsely attributed, he could sue those who made those allegations. However, his words were captured on camera, revealing his board's direction, and the connections between the other boards here, as well, while connecting the dots. The chairman of the zoning board, Carl DeFranco, also made questionable statements. He dismissed public comments and public hearings as simple formality, and disregarded their impact on decisions, routinely standing and shouting at the public during his meetings, threatening to call the police. These town board members, along with their respective boards, have provided inadequate transparency and process while publicizing their actions through newspaper articles and radio interviews as supportive. A town clerk being trained by the town attorney on camera. Nobody gets nothing. The attorney banters back to the town clerk as they are discussing the increase in FOIL requests in early 2024 outside the town hall in Western on the front porch. That communication after a town meeting and clearly in a public area outside where no expectation of privacy exists. A highway department that doesn't return calls, that doesn't supply its maintenance reports or inventory reports, nor the schedule of repairs slated for any seasonal or other work to be provided on highway roads to the people in the town, either in person, access to, or via FOIL as the public records they are falling under the state FOIL law. A building committee that hasn't held a public meeting in 30 years, though they just did, and that it appears was by accidentally posting it on the calendar, and then having to put it off because they had to regroup as now the public will attend. The town's boards as a whole not supplying the documents or state records as required by the Committee on Open Government to supply records to be deliberated to. The public via the town's website at least 24 hours in advance of any meeting those records are deliberated in for the public to follow along with. The planning board secretary refusing to supply meeting minutes on demand as required by the open meeting laws after 2 weeks via either email or paper when those paper minutes were available for the attendees at the planning board meeting they were requested at. A zoning and codes enforcement officer that hasn't been to a town board meeting in 2 years, never informing the public nor the town board, as far as we can ascertain, of his actions or activities within the town of Western as that zoning or codes enforcement officer. An ethics board that's never met to post anything, even to designate themselves by a motion and a vote as the ethics board. Again, as far as we the public can ascertain, as there are no minutes of any meetings ever taking place of that ethics board. And it goes on, unabridged and in the public's face here in Western, day after day, month after month for year after year without the town's boards recognizing the rights of the public they serve. The reality is that the public, the taxpayers these boards and committees in Western serve, are suffering due to that very lack of knowledge, input and information that the town proselytizes to those outside the town as commonplace, while the people inside its borders see nothing. The public, seeking information and knowledge, is constantly frustrated by the reluctance of these individuals on all the boards to disclose their names in public meetings. It's simply their names for those that may not know them. But this policy is not good according to these town boards. It appears that they are apprehensive about giving their names, possibly being misassociated with the deliberations and votes they take as individual board members. Maybe they fear that they could be singled out by taxpayers and voters alike. Singled out from the herd mentality these board members seem to fall prey to. They seem to rally around those that elicit that control and power, like the COs of the beat-up squads and gangs that gather together in the prison structure here in central New York to express their power and authority over those they control. To these individuals on these boards in Western, the common taxpayer in the town seems to be merely an inconvenience. Rest assured that within the next 6 months, these town boards may take action to not only change the town as we its taxpayers know it, but may very well burden the public in the future with a new town hall. Could that potentially bankrupt the town they serve? Do they care? They can just raise the taxes, and that will resolve the issue. What if the boards here reduce cash reserves, passing laws that prevent fiscal growth, while simultaneously locking in the inability of the public to overcome the challenges they could leave for us over the next 10 years? Over the past 3 years, we have received extensive training from the New York State Department of State, the State Comptroller's Office, the New York State Committee on Open Government, Cornell Roads and Highways, and the Association of Towns. These are the same organizations that support town governments across New York State. We have learned that it is common for outgoing boards that are losing control of both their town and local political committees to take negative actions to limit or negatively impact the town's budgets or resources after they leave office. These committees or boards that harbor grudges, such as the outgoing faux Republican Committee in Rome or the GOP in Western, possess the power to maintain the status quo or implement changes that could potentially harm the community. Why would the public in Western allow themselves to be blackmailed by these kinds of actions? Because of the secrecy of the GOP in Western. What you don't know about what's happening in the town of Western GOP won't hurt you, until it does. In Western, 3 days before the primary election here, citizens face challenges that could continue to restrict their access to information and maintain the status quo of secrecy or opt to move on and drop the illegitimate locking down of the public here. When town boards like the town board in Western act with impunity toward the public they serve, disregarding their opinions and beliefs, it is crucial for the public to take notice. When town boards restrict the public's input and voice, call the police on citizens, enact increasingly stringent laws and policies to prevent public access, to electioneering and campaigning in the town via signage laws that the town simply can't or won't enforce, the people take notice. When town boards continually strengthen their recording policies against open streaming of town meetings, while simultaneously discontinuing their own streaming activities, it is concerning to the public. When a town is so pointed towards so much action to prevent involvement or information to or from the people, it is concerning to the public. These town boards are aware already that their reputations have been tarnished. For many that have grown up here, they rest on the town board to protect their already dissolving reputations here. But soiled reputations are the fallout of each one of their own actions, as a herd or as individuals. Most have nothing to lose and therefore have no reason to refrain from their fast-paced actions of change over the next 6 months until they leave office. Regardless as to the outcomes, regardless as to how it impacts the public they serve, the retaliatory and retributive actions in Western from the GOP or from the town boards are similar to those issues we have witnessed in Rome, where Mayor Lanigan assaulted someone much older than himself, which is actually assault in the 2nd degree, carrying a Class D felony under New York State Penal Section 200, specifically assaulting someone 65 years and up. Death threats have also been directed at candidates for council seats in Rome and Amsterdam, New York, where a politician was threatened over the phone and the incident was recorded, another via text. These actions are not isolated incidents. There are also killings and death threats in other states. These actions in Western are consistent with the struggle for survival of deeply entrenched political powers that have severely negatively impacted our ability to maintain our infrastructure, buildings, and resources. It negatively impacts the citizens here on a daily basis, even those who do not actively participate in the political process. The creation and implementation of clearly arbitrary policies by town boards, regardless of whether they are recorded and broadcast to the public, are indicative of the fear these boards are experiencing right now. The town board's fear of the public, which simply wants to know what is happening and is being silenced, is evident. The question remains, why are they so afraid? Such behavior exemplifies desperation and a loss of control. These boards, at their wits' end, and with no recourse but to turn away from the public they have already shunned for years, are a clear disaster for the public here. The retaliation directed at the public, evident in every video recording of these boards' meetings, serves as a stark example of the self-serving nature of their actions, even if it exposes their own dysfunctional processes. A process that has been kept secret for so long may well come with a cost. Consider a child whose candy is taken away. Often they throw the candy into the dirt rather than give it up. It is difficult to predict the consequences of such behavior from these boards in turmoil, but the public must be forewarned. If the public option to create a better tomorrow via open communication and public comment wins in the primary election on Tuesday, the public may very well lose at the same time. This win and lose process is a recurring cost and is generally associated with the absence of term limits, creating deep political voids like dark players that can create havoc in many of the resulting committees or local governments. Term limits reduce this kind of dark matter interference and the crabbing or sidestepping that results from, and is often seen in newly elected local governments and in communities like Western. The resultant inability of new board members to make serious change due to that crabbing can very well be an additional cost to change. It is also the cost of extended, non-contested, unquestioned, and unbridled power and control, all left without the public's attentiveness or concern, stewing in a pot of self-interest and indulgence, that deep pot full of the stank and rancid years of selfishness that make up the core of the current town boards in Western steams away, without the ability of the public to turn their nose up at it, hidden, as it were, under the wet earth in the basement of the town hall. However, change can find its place if there are those willing to take the heat. We have been stirring that pot in Western for years, tending to it, watching it steam. We can handle the heat, and with it so can the public of Western, because the town belongs to the taxpayers, not to some musical chair town board with rotating members that flex their muscles, and then simply never leave. So, vote for less fodder and more reality. Vote with your heart and mind on Tuesday. Vote to disband the rhetoric, self-interest, and the kind of chaos that befalls acts of arbitrary process. Choose to allow a future that emboldens the public as not only a source of tax dollars, but as a valuable input into the function and process here in Western. Vote for classic values-based conservative views of the real Republican Party in Western, and then make that a reality too in spring 2026. Vote for what's right, as it was intended by our forefathers, as it was written, signed, and sealed in the Declaration and in the Constitution. Vote to support the ideals of the Americans who helped to create the America we are free to live, work, and raise our families in. Vote with clarity and the perseverance to create a better tomorrow, because the people of the town of Western deserve that.